Good morning, everyone. I am here to do lesson number 3 of the Beginning to Knitting from Zero series. Today we are going to talk about knitting the garter stitch on the bias and how to do a horizontal rib or welting. So I'm going to start with the welting. To start, I am using US size 7 needles and a regular worsted weight yarn. And let's get started. So to start out, we're going to make a slip knot. To do so, I'm going to take my working weight yarn, my tail, put it between my middle and index finger. I'm going to take my working yarn, place it over my thumb, to put the tail over my working weight yarn and pull this yarn opposite through the hole that I made. That will create a slip knot that I'm going to place onto my needle. And from there, I'm going to cast on 10 stitches, this counting as number 1. So to cast on, I'm going to use the knitting cast on method. I'm going to insert my needle into the back of the stitch. I'm going to yarn over counterclockwise using my working yarn. I'm going to pull that working yarn through that stitch, and then I'm going to place that stitch onto my left needle. Okay, so to do that again, I'm going to insert into the back of this stitch. I'm going to wrap my yarn counterclockwise. I'm going to pull through here. I'm going to place that stitch onto my left needle. So that's 3. Insert into the stitch, wrap counterclockwise, pull through, and place that stitch onto my left needle. 4. Into the back of the stitch, wrap counterclockwise, pull through, and off, into the back of the stitch, around, off, and put it onto my left needle. So that's 6. Got 4 more. Go into the back of the stitch, being careful not to split my yarn, around the back, through and off, into the back of the stitch, around, through, and on. That should be number 8. 2 more. Into the back, counterclockwise, through, onto the left, into the back, counterclockwise, through, and onto the back. So we're starting with our welting. So to do so, I'm going to knit the first row. And to knit this row, we're going to, again, insert into the back of this stitch. I'm going to wrap counterclockwise, pull through, and instead of placing it onto my left needle, I'm actually going to pull this stitch off the left. So what I'm doing is I'm transferring stitches from my left needle to my right needle on this first row. So I'm going to insert into the back, wrap counterclockwise, and pull through. That's stitch number 2. Insert into the back, wrap counterclockwise, pull through, and off, into the back, counterclockwise, through, off, into the back, counterclockwise, through and off. I'm going to do this all the way across the row to knit the whole first row. Back, counterclockwise, off, two more, through the back, counterclockwise, off, through the back, counterclockwise, and off. So we knit the whole first row. I'm going to turn, which means I'm going to put this needle into my left hand and pull my empty needle onto my right. In this next row, we're going to purl all the way across the row. So to do the purl stitch, we're going to insert into the front of the stitch. I'm going to wrap clockwise, and I'm going to push the working yarn through the stitch. So you'll see that it comes out on the back side there. And then I'll pull this stitch off the left needle. So again, through the front, wrap clockwise, push, and pull it off the left needle. So what I'm doing here is basically the exact opposite of working the knit stitch. So through the front, wrap clockwise, off, through the front, clockwise, and off, through the front, clockwise, and off. 4 more, through the front, clockwise, and off, through the front of the stitch, wrap clockwise, and off, 2 more, through the front of the stitch, clockwise, and off, through the front of the stitch, clockwise, and off. Okay, so for the third row, this will be the last row of this rib. We're going to knit this row all the way across. So again, to do the knit stitch, we'll insert into the back of the stitch, do wrap counterclockwise, pull it through, and off of my left needle, into the back, wrap counterclockwise, through and off, into the back, counterclockwise, off, into the back, counterclockwise, and off, into the back, counterclockwise, and off, into the back, counterclockwise, and off. 4 more, into the back, counterclockwise, and off, into the back, counterclockwise, and off, back, counterclockwise, and off, counterclockwise, and off. Okay, so that was the last row of this rib. So we're doing again the horizontal rib or welting stitch. So for the next row, I'm going to turn, and I'm going to knit back in this direction. So I knit, I purled, I knit, and now I'm going to knit again. So insert into the back, counterclockwise and off, back, counterclockwise and off, counterclockwise and off, counterclockwise off, counterclockwise off, counterclockwise off, counterclockwise off, knit, counterclockwise off, knit, counterclockwise off. So now we've got the next rib going in the opposite direction. So we're going to turn again. We're going to purl this next row. Okay, you can actually see the rib starting on this side. You've got your 3 rows of horizontal rib or welt, and then we're going to start the next 3 rows of the second rib here. So again, to purl, we insert into the front of the stitch, focus, there we go. I'm going to wrap clockwise and pull off the left needle, clockwise off the left, clockwise off the left, focus, there it goes, clockwise off the left, clockwise off the left. Let me get this mess out of the background. Clockwise off the left, clockwise off the left, clockwise off the left, clockwise off the left, and clockwise off the left. Okay, so that's row number 2 for the second rib. Okay, we're going to turn. I'm going to knit. This is row number 6, so we'll knit the whole row this way. Insert into the back of the stitch, wrap clockwise, pull through and off, back of the stitch, wrap clockwise, pull through and off, back of the stitch, clockwise, through and off, clockwise, through, off, off, through, off, and off. So that was our final row, knit all the way across of this rib. Okay, I'm going to turn again, and again, this being the next one, we're going to knit all the way across this way. So again, we're going to insert through the back, wrap counterclockwise, through, pull off the left needle, counterclockwise, through and off the left, counterclockwise, through and off the left, knitting all the way across the row. Okay. So that was the first of this third rib here. Okay, you can really see this rib pattern starting to show up. At the end of this one, we'll do one more, and then we're going to teach you how to cast off here. So for this next row, I'm going to insert into the front of the stitch. I'm going to wrap clockwise. I'm going to push through and off, and again I'm purling this whole row here. I lost all of my tension in my hand here. Hold on. There we go. Row number 8, purled all the way across this row. turn, and I'm going to knit the final row of this rib. And to do so, we're going to insert into the back of the stitch, wrap counterclockwise, pull through and off, back of the stitch, counterclockwise, through and off, through and off, through and off, back of the stitch, clockwise, through and off, through and off. So this is the final row of this rib. I'm going to do one more, and at the end of this last rib here, I'm going to teach you how to cast off. Okay, so we turn, and we're going to knit across the back of this row. So again, into the back of the stitch, counterclockwise and off, counterclockwise, knitting across the row. And off. Okay. So this is rib number 4. I need to turn. I'm going to purl across this row. And for the final row, we're going to knit all the way across. To the back. To the back, counterclockwise and off. Counterclockwise and off. And finally, the last stitch through the back, counterclockwise and off. So that being our final row of this rib, this swatch here, we're going to cast off. So to cast off, we're going to knit the first 2 of this row. And I'm going to take this stitch and then we're going to knit the next stitch. We're going to take the stitch from behind and pull it over the first stitch. Knit the next stitch. Going to take the previous stitch and knit off, to knit the next one, take the previous stitch and knit off, knit the next stitch, take the previous stitch, knit off, 4 more, take the next one, knit, previous stitch, knit off, knit 1, take the previous stitch, knit off, knit 1, previous stitch, knit off, knit 1, previous stitch, knit off. At this point, I'm going to cut this thread. And I'm going to pull it through. Okay. At this point, I would take these 2 threads and sew them back into the work to complete the swatch. But you can see the horizontal rim or welting here on both sides. We've created 4 ribs. Okay, this is a reversible stitch, and as is most of the stitches that we've done in this series so far. So I'm going to set that aside, and we're going to do the garter stitch on the bias. To do so, again, we're going to cast on. We're going to take our tail, our yarn over our thumb, pull our tail over our working yarn, and take this thread opposite and pull it through that hole. And we're going to put it on our needle, pull it taut. Okay. At this point, we're going to cast on only 1 more stitch. So we start with 2 stitches for this pattern. Okay. So wrap it around, pull it through. I'm going to place it onto the left needle. Okay. At this point, I'm going to begin knitting. So with our 2 stitches on here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually increase 1. So what that means is I'm going to knit in both the front and the back of the stitch. So I start in the back, I'm going to knit this way and pull it through, and then I'm going to insert into the front this way, pull it through, and pull over 2 stitches. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing in the second stitch. I'm going to knit in the back, I'm going to knit in the front, and pull it through. I will go through that process again on the 3rd row. Okay, so that was our first row. I increased 2. I'm going to turn, and I'm just going to knit across the row. Okay. Now, knit across the row. I'm going to turn again. I'm going to knit 1, and then I'm going to knit into, or this one. So that means I insert into the back loop, wrap, and pull through, I'll insert into the front of this one, around, and pull through, and then off. Okay, I'll do the same thing for the second one. So I insert into the back of this stitch, wrap counterclockwise and through, and then I'll insert into the front of the same stitch, counterclockwise, pull through and off, and then I'm just going to knit this last one. Okay, so that was row number 2, or row number 3. I did 1 increase. At this point, I'm going to turn. I'm just going to knit across this row. So I'm going to knit all 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. That was row number 4. Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn, and I'm going to do the next increase row. So I'm going to knit the first one, and on this one I'm going to do 1 increase, so that means I take the stitch, I knit into the back of this one, and then into the front here, and pull it off. So I increased 1, I'm going to knit 2, for this stitch I'm going to knit into the back, and then I'm going to knit into the front, pull it off, and then I'll knit the last stitch. So now I've got 8. Okay? So now I'm going to turn, and I'm going to knit 8 across. And this is just straight knit across this row. Now we're going to turn. I'm going to do another row of increase. Okay, to do so, we're going to knit the first one. Okay, I'm going to knit into the back of the second stitch, and then I'll knit into the front of that second stitch for 1 increase. I'm going to knit the next 4, I'm going to do 1 increase, so I'll knit into the back of this stitch, and then into the front of this stitch, and then finally knit just the last one. So now there's 10 stitches across my row here. Okay? So on the next row, I'm going to turn and just knit straight across. We'll do 2 more rows of increase before we start the decrease. So at this next row, we're going to do 2 increases. So it's knit straight across. I'm going to turn. I'm going to knit the first stitch. I'm going to knit the back. I'm going to knit the next 6. And then I'm going to do an increase on the next one. So that means I knit into the back of the stitch. And before I pull it off, I'm going to knit into the front of the stitch. Okay. And then finally I will knit the last stitch of this row. So that brings us up to 12. Okay, there's 12 stitches on this row here. Okay. So I'm going to turn. I'm going to knit this row. So clockwise, counterclockwise I mean. Knit 12 across. Do one more increase row, and then I'm going to start the decreases. Okay, so this is 12 across. I'm going to turn again, and this will be our last increase row. Okay, so I turn. I knit the first stitch. I'm going to do an increase on this next stitch, so that means I insert into the back of the stitch, knit, insert into the front of the stitch, knit, and then I pull it off. So that increased 1 stitch. I'm going to knit the next 8. So I'm going to knit into the back of this one. I'm going to knit into the front of this one. And then I'll pull it off to the left. And then knit my final stitch. So this brings us up to 14 for this row. Okay, so I'm going to turn, knit all the way across, and then we'll start our decrease rows. So this row I'm going to knit all the way across, counterclockwise, through, counterclockwise, through, counterclockwise, 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 And now we're going to turn and start our decrease rows. So I'm going to knit the first one. For this one, I'm going to actually insert into the back loop of the next 2 stitches. Pull through and off, so that will decrease 1. I'm going to knit the next 8. We're going to decrease on the next one, so that means I'm going to insert into the back loops of the next 2 stitches. Okay. I'm going to knit through and pull both off, and then finally I will knit, get off there, the last stitch. So that increased or decreased 2 across this row. So I'm going to turn, and I'm just going to knit across this row. Knit. Knit to the next 6. Okay. So for the next row, we're going to turn. I'm going to do 2 more decrease on this row. So for that, we're going to knit the first stitch. I'm going to insert into the back loops of the next 2 stitches. I'm going to yarn over and pull through and take off those 2 stitches, so that decrease 1. I'm going to knit the next until I get to the last 3. I'm going to insert into the back of the next 2 stitches, yarn over, pull through, off, and then I'm going to just knit the last one. Okay, so that did 2 decreases for this row. I'm going to turn, and I'm going to knit across this row. So I'm going to knit every stitch for the entire row. It should be 10, yes. Okay. So we're going to turn again. I'm going to decrease 2 more. Okay. So knit 1. Insert into the back loops of the next 2. Yarn over, pull through. So decrease 1. I'm going to knit the next 4. I'm going to insert into the back of the next 2. I'm going to yarn over, pull through, off, and then knit the last stitch. Okay. Now we're going to turn. I'm going to knit all the way across this row. Knit 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to turn. I'm going to do another row of decrease. So we knit the first one, insert into the back loops of the next 2, knit them together, knit 2, insert into the back of the next 2, knit them together, and then knit the last one. I'm going to turn and knit across the row, so 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to turn, do another row of decrease. So we'll knit the first one, knit 2 together, knit 2 together, maybe. My stitches are very tight, apparently. There we go. There we go. There we go. And knit the last one. Okay. I'm going to turn and just knit across this row. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for our last row, we're going to knit 2 together for both stitches. Knit 2 together, off, knit 2 together, off, I dropped it. Alright, I don't know why my knit 2 togethers are not working for me now. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to just take this last stitch here, pull it over the first stitch, to cut this thread. Pull it through. And there we are. So that's knit on the bias. So again, in this series so far we've done our straight garter stitch. Now this is knit on the bias. So what that does is it just makes the stitches go at a diagonal versus straight across with this one. Okay, so that's 2 new stitches for us. Our welting or horizontal ribbing and knit on the bias. So I will see you guys again next week for 2 new beginner stitches. Have a great week, everyone.